Hello everyone, I'm bringing a video today. We're going to have a quick look at some East German military shoulder boards. Now this is not going to be comprehensive by any means. That would be a ludicrously long video to cover all of the different Waffenfarben used and to look at all the different ranks basically. What we'll be looking at here is ranks up to, well, the colonel ranks within the MVA and the Grenztruppen. I don't have any general shoulder boards to show you here, but we will be having a look at the contrast between colour and combat or field service uniform shoulder boards, so the difference between the camouflage versions and the full colour versions. And there will be a focus on Grenztruppen here because it's basically my interest in terms of what we'll be seeing here in terms of the Waffenfarben, the arm of service colour. Much of it will be Grenztruppen green when we look at the full colour boards. And my intention is to show you an example of the basic design of board, the basic rank that will be displayed in each rank group as the boards progress up through the ranks. So obviously for NCOs, you have a slightly more elaborate version of the soldiers shoulder board, and then for Fähnrich you have a different group of shoulder boards there, and so on up the ranks. The various lieutenants grades through to captain, so lieutenant through Hauptmann, and then major and up through the colonel ranks. So we'll be looking at the basic sort of rank of each of those, the basic board with the lowest form of device you would see on that, to show you the various different designs of board which existed for field service, and then we'll have a look at a huge collection of different full colour shoulder boards. But we're going to start off with Fähnrich shoulder boards to show you a field service shoulder board alongside several different coloured examples to show you the various different variations you did see. The only boards I don't have any examples of here are Luftstreitkraft, which is the Air Force basically, but they were basically per the Army's shoulder boards in terms of design, but used a turquoise blue Waffenfarben, the arm of service colour, which we'll see as we look at these. For the Air Force was a turquoise blue, as it was for air defence as well, air defence units. So we'll have a look at this and I'll talk through all of that a little bit more as we move through the video and look at these various different designs of shoulder board. So shoulder boards, these look teeny tiny in the middle of the frame here. I've lowered the tripod down as far as I can, but I'll be bringing each of these up to the camera to have a look at in a bit more detail. What we have here are a selection of Fähnrich shoulder boards. We have 3 which represent the basic rank of Fähnrich here, and then we have Oberfähnrich, which is the 2 stars on the Fähnrich shoulder board. So the basic Fähnrich shoulder board for field service looks like this, and then obviously you have the sort of chevrons, the silver chevrons down the centre, replaced with actual silver braid on the full colour shoulder boards, which are intended to be used primarily on the service and parade uniforms, of course, and other uniforms where the full colour insignia is appropriate. The one at the end here is sort of an exception to that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. So the field service shoulder board, these are the subdued version for wear on field service uniform, the camouflage uniform. Generally, by the time Fähnrich was introduced, it would be the Strichtarn uniform in the 1970s. The Fleckentarn, or Blumentarn as it's also known, the sort of colloquial term for it, that uniform had basically disappeared off the scene by the time the Fähnrich rank was introduced. But this would have been worn on a camouflage field uniform, which had fittings on the shoulder for fitting shoulder boards. And that entails passing this tail here through a little loop sewn onto the end of the shoulder. And then you'd pass the laces here. I did say I wasn't going to mention this in detail, but I'll mention it in passing. The laces here, which have been looped through the button, which is pushed through the hole in the shoulder board. You can see the back of the button there is where these laces are looped through. This was looped through this tail here and then down through a couple of holes on the shoulder of the uniform. And there are videos on YouTube, as I say, showing you how to do this. This particular button is actually a metal painted grey button, which are earlier. Later you'd see plastic, and we'll have a look at one of those in a minute. But you can see there how the laces pass through that, and you just pop the button into the hole through the shoulder board there, pull the laces through. The rank of Fähnrich is shown by what is effectively a junior officer's shoulder board, but to mark this out from a Unterleutnant or Lieutenant's shoulder board, or the various grades up through captain, you have these silver chevrons worked on the 2 central sections of braid here, and obviously the single star on this style of shoulder board shows the rank of Fähnrich. So that's the field service shoulder board you can see there. The next one along is for a Fähnrich in the Grenztruppen. So it has the Grenztruppen green Waffenfarbe there, the arm of service colour. The use of colours for denoting arm of service is pretty common across various military forces. Strips of cloth on the arm were sometimes used in certain instances historically. Obviously backing for badges, backing for cap badges in some instances, all sorts of different ways, but colour has generally been the way that different branches of service have been identified basically in militaries throughout history, be it the US, be it the British, be it the Germans, be it the French. It's a very common way of identifying infantry from service troops, from, as we have here, border troops with the green. It's a very common method of doing things. And that's one example there of the service uniform or parade uniform shoulder board, or on any uniform, as I say, where full colour insignia was appropriate. Instead of having the further grey braid in the centre here with the little metal chevron, little silver wire chevrons, you have two full silver sets of braid there in the centre with grey on the outside. And we'll see a contrast with the commissioned officers' ranks in a minute or two when we have a look at those shoulder boards. We have a silver metal button here, and this is basically standard across the NVA apart from the Volksmarine, which we'll get onto in a minute, which is over here. We'll show the difference. So the Luftstreitkraft, the Air Force, would use this style of button as well. And they had, if you had a Fähnrich in the Air Force or in the Air Defence Forces, you'd have exactly the same as this, but the colour would be a turquoise blue colour rather than the green. So I can mention the Air Force here, but I don't have any examples to show. The next example is from the NVA, and this is from the motorised infantry. The Waffenfarbe for the motorised infantry was white, of course, which we have here. And otherwise, the shoulder board, the actual details of the rank shown are identical, of course, because it's the same rank of Fähnrich, but we have the white backing material there to identify the arm of service. And the next one along here is a little bit different. This is nominally a naval shoulder board for an Oberfähnrich with 2 stars, so with the next rank up. So it's the same basic design of shoulder board in terms of the way the rank is displayed. Because it's naval rather than grey on the outside, we have blue. We have the naval button here. And then we have the Grenztruppen green arm of service colour, as you can see. And this is because this would be either border boat companies or perhaps the Grenzbrigade-Kust, which was the border patrol unit for the coastline, the northern coastline of Germany, of East Germany. So this combines various elements. It's a naval shoulder board in overall form. If it was a plain naval shoulder board, it would have navy blue as the arm of service colour as well. In this case, we have Grenztruppen green, as I say, because of the specific units we were talking about, because the specific units this would be used by. And if it was naval air units, it would have the turquoise blue of the Air Force colour, basically, but with a naval shoulder board. And that's the way that these different colours and different styles of shoulder board sort of, it allows you to show all the different variations which were possible because of having the backing colour and the colour of the braid on the top here. So we know it's naval, but because we've got the Grenztruppen green here, it's not a general Volksmarine Oberfähnrich, it's an Oberfähnrich in one of the border units of which was sort of under naval jurisdiction, or of a naval nature, shall we say. So that's a quick look at these 4 Fähnrich shoulder boards. We'll move on now to have a look at a further selection of field service shoulder boards, which look at some of the other ranks or the other rank groups, and then we'll move on to have a look at some more full colour shoulder boards as well. So what we have here is a selection of field service shoulder boards. So these are subdued shoulder boards for a broad selection of ranks, basically up to, well, not including general, so no general ranks are displayed here. You'd have a further board similar to this one after this side to show general ranks. They used larger stars on the boards, and they had sort of interleaved colour worked into the braid on them as well to try and represent the gold and silver of the general shoulder boards. So we don't have an example of one of those here, and may have to try and pick one up at some point in the future, or a pair of them, to sort of add to this display of the different shoulder boards used, but they're similar to these shoulder boards here, this design of shoulder board. So from left to right here, we have sort of the basic ranks within each group of the design as the design progresses. So this is the most basic rank of each group. And by adding various devices to these, various stars and so forth, you could show higher ranks. Not only stars, we'll talk a little bit more about that now. This is a basic soldat shoulder board, soldat, soldier, and this could be modified through adding bars across here to show a Gefreiter and various other ranks up to, but not including sergeant. So basically the corporal ranks were shown on here. You also had appointments shown on here, such as Postenführer, which is a Grenztruppen appointment. You'd wear a green band around this, a broad green band, about 2 centimeters, and that would show Postenführer, and that would be from soldat up through the Gefreiter ranks. You could also show that appointment on the shoulder board, and we'll see that in a minute or two when we look at the full colour shoulder boards. I've actually included an example of that there. Next along we have the board here, Unteroffizier, and this is quite a common, I think, conscript NCO rank. You could end up going up through the NCO ranks to a point as a conscript and then a reservist. This is quite a common sort of conscript NCO rank. Before you get to Feldwebel, which is Unterfeldwebel, which is a junior sergeant's rank here, and the only difference between these two is you have this obviously strip of braid around the side here of the Unteroffizier shoulder board. You add a piece across the bottom here to sort of close the loop of the lace or braid all the way around the shoulder board on the Unterfeldwebel shoulder board, and the various grades of Feldwebel, various grades of sergeant were shown by adding stars onto this board. So this, you'd start adding stars to this design of board here to show increasing Feldwebel rank, basically. So that is the next sort of grade up in terms of NCOs, is this various grades of sergeant shown by this board, the basic Unterfeldwebel as we have here, and then Feldwebel, etc., adding stars onto this, right the way up to Stabsfeldwebel, who had 3 in a sort of triangular formation down here, star, 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 and that was the most senior Feldwebel rank. You then have Fähnrich, of course, and when introduced there was 1 grade of Fähnrich, which was shown by the board with the star. So the basic Fähnrich rank has a star from the outset, and then you could add stars up the board, and that took you through to Stabsoberfähnrich with 4 stars up the board. So that was the senior Fähnrich rank from I think 1979 onwards. Say prior to 1979 there was 1 grade of Fähnrich, but then from that point on they introduced various grades of Fähnrich up to Stabsoberfähnrich. And then next to that you have sort of commission ranks going on from there. And you can see, first of all, we have an Unterleutnant, which is this is the basic, junior officer's shoulder board, and that's used through to Hauptmann, which is, of course, captain equivalent. So you'd have the Unterleutnant here with 1, and then you'd have 2 side by side for Leutnant, and then 3 in a triangle for Oberleutnant, and then Hauptmann, captain, was the 3 in a triangle with another star on the board as well. So a total of 4 stars, 2 across here and then 2 up here for Captain Hauptmann. You then move on to Major, which has a single star on this design of board. So this design of board, again, these 3 here, you would always see some form of device on these. You'd always see at least 1 star on these, where that's not necessarily true for the ones over on the left-hand side here. For each of these, you'd have 1 star as a minimum, and for this one, that's the most junior rank using this type of board, which is Major, as I say. And then by adding more stars to that, you would get on up to Colonel, which is Oberst, of course, which would have 2 stars across the bottom, side by side, and then 1 above, again in a triangle formation there. Oberstleutnant, Lieutenant Colonel, just had the 2 stars side by side at the bottom. And then you move on to the general ranks, which have a similar board to this. And again, you start off with 1 star as Generalmajor, so Major General, and then on up to Marshal der DDR, which is the Field Marshal of the Marshal of the German Democratic Republic, and that had 1 large Marshal star. The most senior general rank was Army General, which had 4 stars on the general style shoulder board, which, as I say, is similar to this but larger and has a different design of braid used. So that's a quick run through the ranks. I didn't want to go into them in too much detail, but hopefully that's enough detail. And this shows you the basic design of board for each of those rank groups, if you will. Hopefully that's sort of clarified. And this is how the design of the board changed. And you can see here why you needed the differentiation between Fähnrich and the Lieutenant ranks up to Hauptmann, up to Captain, because without those silver chevrons, these two would look extremely similar, and they are indeed very different ranks. Fähnrich, of course, being a warrant officer rank equivalent. So there are 2 types of shoulder board I want to mention very briefly here before we move on to looking at the full colour shoulder boards, while we're still talking about field service boards and talking about various ranks. And that is boards for Offiziersschule and Fähnrichsschule, which are the 2 grades of cadet ranks used by the NVA and the Grenztruppen and so forth. They were for officer students and then for warrant officer students. So Offiziersschule is commissioned officers and Fähnrichsschule is the warrant officer students. Now the basic rank of the basic grade within the Fähnrichsschule rank system was the first year, where you would have an F added onto here using the basics sort of Unter Feldwebel rank board, and then you'd have various bars added up here to show the years of training, the years into the training course. For Offiziersschule, you used these 2 different designs. For the preparatory course, you'd have the basic Unteroffizier shoulder board with this device here. I don't have an example of the F for the Fähnrichsschule, but I do have an Offiziersschule S here, which was used, and you'd have an F basically in this style for Fähnrichsschule. So you'd have this mounted up on the shoulder board here. And then for the first proper year of the course, you'd have a board like this with the S mounted up here. And then as you progress through the course each year, you'd have a shoulder board with an additional bar on there to show the progression through the Offiziersschule or Fähnrichsschule progression through the training, basically as a cadet, effectively, for either a commissioned officer or a warrant officer. So just mentioning those boards here, much as I don't have examples of them to show, I just wanted to mention them here and how that system worked. You can see all of these boards illustrated online. There are various pages that deal with the various ranks, so if you want more information on that, obviously go and have a look online. The information is freely available. So we have a selection of full colour boards to look at here, and these are all border troops related in one way or another. They're all Grenztruppen related because that's my primary interest, but we have some obviously naval Grenztruppen, if you want to put it that way, Grenzbrigadekust or boat companies, border boat companies shoulder boards to look at here as well. So we'll start on the left hand side here. This would be the naval equivalent of Soldat, which is Matros, so sailor basically. And if this was plain naval board, it would have a navy navy braid around the outside. Naval aviation, it had the turquoise blue, and obviously in this case we have Grenztruppen green because it's for Grenzbrigadekust or for the border boat companies as mentioned. So it's Matros, the most junior rank within the naval forces. We then have a Grenztruppen Gefreiter here, and this is an example of the metal bars which were fitted to these, as you can see, to represent that rank. So it's the basic soldier's board, but this is colour in this instance. The grey is to match the service uniform. The green is, of course, the arm of service, the Waffenfarbe. And you have the metal bar across there, as you can see, to show the rank of Gefreiter. We have the naval equivalent of that here, although this is actually, it's not a metal bar in this instance, it's a piece of gold braid sewn on, as you can see. But this is the naval equivalent of Obermatros. So it's the next rank up from Matros, much as Gefreiter is the next rank up from Soldat. And this has the Grenztruppen Postenführer role insignia, basically. So it's an appointment, it's a position rather than a rank, but it's post leader. And that was shown by the broad green band added on here, which you can see is sewn together with a piece of elastic in the back, so it just slides over. Because it's an appointment, it can be taken away, and it's not a rank that's granted. It's very easy for a Postenführer to be reassigned, and therefore you can removable device to add on to the shoulder board there, as you can see. We then have an example of Feldwebel rank. So this again is Grenztruppen, but you can see in full colour we have silver braid in place of the drab braid we saw before, and the silver star, the single silver star, shows the rank of Feldwebel. Obviously, Unterfeldwebel would be no star, and then, as I say, you add more stars as you go up through the Feldwebel grades. This is actually made of the finer material associated with professional soldiers' uniforms, so professional NCOs and officers had this grade of cloth. Generally, shoulder boards didn't use this cloth, but this is an example intended for use by troops around Berlin, particularly border control at crossing points. The PKE as well, I believe, used these, which is the passport control units, which was Stasi in Grenztruppen uniform, as I understand it. So that's a little bit unusual in that it's made with this finer cloth. Most of them don't have that, as we'll see in a moment. We then have the naval equivalent, but again with the Grenztruppen Waffenfarbe for, as I say, Grenzbrigade Kust, or the boat companies, border boat companies. And this is, of course, the equivalent naval rank of Feldwebel, which is, if I just remind myself here, I do have a little list because I'm not so good on the naval ranks, Meister. And this could also, naval shoulder boards in particular, could also feature a device showing the branch of service within the Navy. So anchors, gears, that sort of thing to show, and obviously I think medical insignia as well, because you have this, you don't have the various Waffenfarben in the naval service other than for Grenztruppen and air services. You would have a device in the centre to show your naval speciality as well, potentially. So that would fit between the stars, showing rank on the shoulder board. We then have an Oberfeldwebel shoulder board here, which is shown by 2 stars on the Feldwebel shoulder board, as you can see. So it's the basic Feldwebel or Unterfeldwebel shoulder board. 1 star would show Feldwebel, 2 stars shows Oberfeldwebel. It's pretty simple in that regard. This has got the standards, it's a little bit worn, but you can see this has the standard rougher wool cloth, as is typical of the conscript uniforms. But most shoulder boards had this, even though they were worn on uniforms made of even if they were worn on uniforms made of the finer professional soldiers cloth, most shoulder boards were like this. But as I say, this one here is a little bit of an outlier in that regard, so I wanted to include it here to show this is more typical. This is a standard Oberfeldwebel shoulder board. So you can see that there. Slight reset there, the lights just failed on me. So I think I just got onto the last 2 shoulder boards, which are both commissioned officer rank. And we have here, first of all, again, Grenztruppen. You can see the green backing there. We have a Lieutenant, which is the 2 stars side by side. This is an original board, but as you can see, they've sort of been crammed on there, not particularly neatly next to one another. But this is a board, as far as I'm aware, is original. I've not made this up, not put this together, but you have that as an example there. Lieutenant shoulder board. Obviously a single star would be Unterleutnant, the basic lieutenant rank, or the most junior lieutenant rank, and 1 more star above these would be Oberleutnant. You add another star on top of that, you get Hauptmann, which we have here, which is the most senior rank that uses this designer board, and this is Captain. You can see again, Grenztruppen, Waffenfarbe there. So basically, very similar to the style of showing rank in the German army going back many, many years, this design of shoulder board. It would in theory have disappeared, at least from the field service uniform, with the introduction of the UTV uniform, which showed rank using a set of patches which attached on with loops. That would have really changed the style of East German uniform. I think it's fair to say. It's amazing, even in the late 1980s, rank on field uniform, on the camouflage combat uniform, was still being shown by the subdued shoulder boards we looked at, which is quite an antiquated way of doing things at the time. Obviously not uncommon in the Warsaw Pact, it's fair to say, and East Germany was moving away from that, but fascinating from that point of view, that this older style of showing rank, analogous to that used on the service uniform, more dress uniform and sort of everyday service uniform, was still being used on the camouflage combat clothing as well. Certainly anachronistic by Western standards, I think it's fair to say, but fascinating from that point of view. I find it very interesting. Hopefully you've found it interesting looking through this selection of military shoulder boards. I do plan to make a video at some point in the future looking at some sort of civilian shoulder boards as well, possibly customs and some police, although there's a quasi-military element there with the police as well. So we may well have a look at some of those in a separate video at some point in the future going forward. As I say, not a comprehensive video, but hopefully it's been somewhat interesting, at least looking at this selection of shoulder boards. So I hope you found it interesting looking at this. As I say, not comprehensive by any means, but hopefully informative. Obviously there are videos on YouTube already, military and monetary. Has put up a video about how to fit these to uniform, which is basically the same for service or field service uniforms. And that's quite useful for those who aren't aware of the correct fitting of these. You do occasionally see uniforms where they haven't been fitted correctly up for sale, where someone's clearly slapped them on and not fitted them correctly. I've seen them sort of tied on in odd ways. I remember with buttons that aren't really suitable and things like that. So those videos. So I hope you found it interesting looking at this. As I say, by no means is this a comprehensive look at MVA shoulder boards. We haven't looked at all the different armed service colours, for example. We've only looked at the basic ranks in each sort of group as you change design of shoulder board going up the ranks. We've not looked at every rank there, and obviously we've not looked at generals, and we've not looked at Fähnrichschüler and Officerschüler shoulder boards. So that's just something to note here. There are gaps in this video. It's not comprehensive, but nevertheless, hopefully it's been informative and interesting. And there are plenty of places online where you can find the information which I haven't covered here, the missing ranks and so forth, and obviously lists of the Waffenfarben which were used by the MVA. All of that information is available online. If you're interested in getting a bit more of that information, I highly recommend going and having a read of the various sources that are out there. You get a very basic sort of run through on Wikipedia, and then there are articles on various websites dealing with the topic in more detail. So do go and have a look. There's quite a bit out there if you're interested to learn more. Hopefully you found the video interesting. If you have and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're new to subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. That's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.